Hello, and welcome to the third video in my beginner series. My name is Leah, and I teach acrylic painting on this channel. Today I will be focusing on brushworks and techniques, and to help you learn the brushes and practice some of the brushstrokes and blending methods that I use the most when painting. When painting in a small scale, I really only use these brushes each time. The large oval wash, which is 3/4 inch, the smaller Filbert, which is a size 8 from Princeton, a flat brush, which is either 3/8 of an inch to about 1/2 an inch is fine, some sort of liner or rigger or script brush, a larger point, and then a tiny small point for some detail work. All right, you will often see me start with this large oval wash brush, and you can see these two rounded edge brushes I use almost every single time I paint. I start with this one with a good amount of water, and the reason why you want to put a good amount of water in a brush when you're trying to spread paint is you're dealing with paper which has high absorbency, and then also you want to make that paint move across the page without any dry brushing. So I typically am using burnt sienna as an underpainting, and what's really wonderful about this brush is not only does it give you a nice blending edge because it's round, but you can also use it on the thin edge as well. So this right now would be the thick edge, but then with a good amount of water for bristle control, again, you can use it vertically for more delicate shapes. And again, because it is rounded, you can make a very small mark with this brush if you're light to the touch, or go ahead and lay it in thick. I do only ever use this brush in the very beginning of the painting, and if you chose not to get it for whatever reason, you could lay in your underpainting with your larger flat brush. That would be okay too. The next paintbrush that I'm picking up is my friend Filbert. I will typically blend a sky with a Filbert, or I will blend any kind of mist. Anything where I don't need a hard graphic edge, I will typically pick up Filbert. So just to demonstrate here, and I'm going to drag a little bit of dry brushing on our page. I have some titanium white and blue right now in this brush with a pretty good amount of opacity. I will use a circular brush stroke with the Filbert and just let those bristles flare out for a diffused look. And you really can't do this with the flat unless you're really willing to mutilate that thing. My Filbert brush gets the most amount of wear than all my other brushes because I really hammer that thing on the page. So now I've picked up some titanium white and just rotating around, and you'll see me do this so much, rotating around and building up layers with the Filbert is something I don't replicate with my other brushes. You could do this with a large point brush if you wanted as well, because it has a rounded edge. Mist, clouds, and blending backgrounds is what I would use this the most. Covering up edges, making smooth gradients. I'm going to darken up this edge here just to give you a little bit better of an idea of what this can do. And I'm really getting in there and scrubbing this page with this brush. I'm definitely not being gentle with it. Thankfully, the Filbert brush that I like the most for my techniques is just a Princeton snap brush, and they are really economical. All the materials that you need for my tutorials are listed in each description with a pretty thorough list for you to peruse. Going back with the white, highlighting that edge, and you can use this on both edges, the flat edge and then the side edge. You're going to get something pretty similar, but what does vary is the size. So when you learn to manipulate your brushes, you can get a lot of different shapes and sized shapes out of each angle that you choose to paint on. And that's the Filbert. I want to show you this painting, and all of this background is all done with Filbert blending. All of this mottled edges and building up layers, that's all Filbert with some friends helping for the detail work. And on to the next brush. Now we have the flat brushes. After Filbert's all done and put away, I often will whip out a flat brush. Sometimes I will even paint almost an entire painting with a flat brush. The tutorial that was painted earlier this week, 100% flat brush. I have another painting from a demo a while ago. All of the background done with a flat brush, all the same size, most of the foreground as well. You can even get a good amount of detail work, vertical, little grasses and such, with a flat brush if you just hold it on that small edge. This one in particular is a synthetic flat. It is 3/8 of an inch, which is what I like for painting in this size on paper. And what's nice about it is you can cut in some really painterly graphic shapes. And that would be the wide edge. Also, you can drag straight up. Get some smaller shapes. You're gonna get a lot of variation though. If I want precision while dragging up, I will grab the liner. This is the brush that I will often pull up trunks. It holds a decent amount of paint. You can do a good amount of drawing with this brush. The dry brushing that it gives you is also very nice and aesthetic. You can use it in your overlayers, letting a lot show through. You can also pull straight up and get a different type of grass. Very delicately pulling the bristles away from the page while also pulling up. And then of course, the flat brush pine tree. I'll do one of those for you really quickly. So you would start with the thin edge and pull down. And then with the tiniest corner, you might want to put your wrist down for this. You start with the top and then zigzag your way all the way down the tree. And then as the branches get as big as the entire side of your brush, then you can lay it down a little bit more. If I were to have one brush, just one single brush to do even an entire series of paintings, it would be the flat. And I don't think I would be alone in that at all. All right, on to the next brush category. Okay, so the script brush, the liner, or the rigger brush. Now the rigger brush is interesting. I just started using it more frequently lately, came in a pack, but it has a broad edge and then a very thin edge. The bristles are nice and long, so it has a nice bounce to it. You can get a very fine line with it, but I think if you had the other brushes that I recommend having on hand, you might want to just go ahead and get a liner. Now the liner you'll see me using for grasses and branches primarily. There might be some occasion where I need to do a little negative painting spot and I can't get in there with my point brush, then I will whip out the liner. So this is fantastic. You want to hold this at an angle, at this type of an angle right there. And the more angled you hold it, the more control you'll have over the line. It won't flick out from underneath you. So you can do really nice, thin, controlled lines with this. I recommend you put your hand down on something because it can get away from you. Just go nice and slow. If you have enough water in your brush, then you can do very, very dainty lines. I mean the smallest. So I will paint branches, and then I will also do grasses with this guy. Just make sure to have enough water. And if something isn't quite opaque enough, I would rather go over it again than to have the dry brushing happen, which, see, I got a little bit of dry brushing there. This would be a big tuft of grass, foreground grasses. This is pretty much the only application that I use for this brush, but when you really want it to look like that, it is hard to rival this kind of brush stroke with any other brush. And I love having less stuff, that is for sure. I like having really minimalist setups, but this is a brush that I do always have on hand. Okay, for the last paintbrush category that I use on my tutorials in this scale is the round brush family. Now I have two different brands here. I do recommend having like a bigger round. This one is a size 6, and then the smaller round, this one is a 3/0, but this one, the bristles are really flayed out. Definitely recommend you lean towards more of a watercolor brush rather than an acrylic oil brush, something that's soft where the bristles are a little bit longer and easier to control. So I'm going to bring this painting back to look at. All of the interior of this tree is done with a round brush, real stylistic little jabby motions. So this one I will often use to get in there and make small marks to cut out a tree, cut in some negative shapes. You can also use this brush to paint petals. Just start at the edge and then pull in. There is not another brush that will do this for you. And then of course you can do a lot of tree shapes if you wanted to be a little bit more organic than using a flat. And then wherever you needed to get smaller, the liner. I do like how you can alternate the thickness without rotating the brush. It has to do more with pressure. So the harder that you push down, you're going to get a thicker line. And then as you pull it up, you will get a thinner line. And then the daintiest round brush, that is usually for cutting in negative shapes. Little tiny places, or if I need to just fix something really small, that's when you see me pull out the small round brush. Detail work. All right, now that we've gone over what your brushes do and what shapes they make and what I use them for the most frequently, I'm going to show you on these paintings the techniques that I've used to achieve these results. In the sky here, I have used a lot of dry brushing. So I've started thicker with the paint and then I've dragged it down with just that dry brush effect in the sky here. Now, a lot of the colors that I use on my acrylic painting tutorials are semi-transparent, or if they have water, they will also be more transparent. And that leads us to the second technique, which is glazing. I use glazing in almost all of my paintings. I use it here in the ocean a lot. So there's going to be a good amount of water in the brush, and then I'm going to layer in different colors. That's going to create a lot of gradients, a lot of subtle changes in color, and when the colors complement each other, it can make some really stunning effects. The next technique that I use quite frequently, and this is a blend technique, is the wet on wet blend. Now, this painting was done very quickly, and to get a really smooth blend, I did wet to wet in the sky and then wet to wet in the mountains, creating a little bit more differentiation between the layers of the hills. And then this is the last technique. It's scumbling. So a lot of small paintbrush marks have been made here with less paint, kind of scumbling along, and that gives it a really rich, deep look, and there's a lot of variation in the color of the tree here. I hope you've enjoyed this continuation of the beginner's painting series, and that you'll join me in the next video that's going to focus on composition and the preparation work that I put into paintings before you even see me touch them with a paintbrush on the stream. So until next time, happy painting.